Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast. This is Janie and Russ.
Hello, everybody out there.
All right, so welcome back to another episode. Today we are talking about unlearning and relearning. And we think this is so important to talk about because 90% of who we are is due to the subconscious programming. All right, that actually starts when we are between 0 and 7 years of age. And there's a lot of things that could be happening in your life and is due to programming. And sometimes you don't really understand what's happening, why you're suffering, why you're in pain, why you're, maybe dating the same type of woman or the same type of man, bad relationships. And it's because there is subconscious mind programming that has happened since you were a kid. So with that being said, I want to share this little small bit of research that I did, okay? The subconscious mind houses our early childhood programming, which is our auto function, like breathing, digestion, emotional intelligence and regulation, our beliefs, habits, reactions, triggers, and is actually our fight or flight. When a child is born, they have two fears, okay? Only two: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. A child has no logic or reason. So to make their needs known, they use primitive responses like crying, all right? All other fears are learned over the years by identification, association, and programming, okay? From the age of 0 to about 7 to 8 years of age, the child develops a library of these identifications, associations, and programs. So they learn, what's good, what's bad, what's negative, what's positive. And these programs become the life script of the child. So as an adult, we are all walking around according to our subconscious programming that we got between the ages of 0 to 7. Another thing I want to share before we just kind of get into this podcast is that there's something called the critical mind, and that's the filter between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Now, remember, the subconscious is 90% of who we are, okay? But this critical mind, a child does not have. So everything a child gets is dumped right into the subconscious mind. So if a child is, in a home that doesn't have any food to eat, bam, that's poverty, dumped right into the subconscious mind. If a child doesn't have, a safe place to lay their head to sleep, that's safety and security issues dumped right into the subconscious mind. So we're going to tackle like this unlearning and relearning and why it's so important for us to do. So I wanted to kind of start with that. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so just to piggyback off what you're saying, there's a quote by Aristotle. A lot of people probably heard it. It said, if you give me a child for the first 7 years, I'll show you the man or woman. And it's really based off of the science that you have there, because for the most part, they're in like theta and delta state. So for the most part, all they're doing is mimicking their surroundings. They're like an empty vessel. So, any of you who've been blessed to have children or to have been around children, you'll see those early stages, like an infant, they're just looking at your lips. When they see you talk, they hear words coming out and they're mimicking the words. That's how they learn language, and as they begin to walk and do different things, they're mimicking you. Like a little boy, like my son, when he was little, they'll stand there. If I put my hands in my pocket and stand a certain way, he would do the same thing, because they're really trying to get their cue on how to behave or how to act. And one more thing I'll say is, and as they get older, people will say, kids may not hear what you say, but they see what you do. So definitely during those formidable years from 0 to 7, it's just really a lot of mimicking what they see in their environment and their surroundings.
Yeah. And so why is this important to discuss, right? And It's important for a lot of reasons. One, if you don't have any children, it's important for you to know this before you start to have children, okay? Because
Facts.
everything you say and do to that child between 0 and 7, and I'm even going to say in utero, because the emotions of a woman, the thoughts of a woman when she is pregnant with a child is also being lodged into that child's memory and cells. But, and this is backed by research, you are forming the subconscious mind. And so as adults, right, you have these issues and you don't even know why, but it goes way back to when you were a child. And sometimes you don't put two and two together. All right. So that's one reason why this is important. Another reason, and that's if you haven't had any children, but another reason is that perhaps you have children, and perhaps when you had your children, you weren't the most conscious. You weren't the most, conscious when you were raising your child, when they was between in those formative years. It's not too late to start helping your child reprogram. And so we want to talk about unlearning and relearning. There's never too late. It's never too late to relearn. And it's so important to do this because we need it. We need the healing. We really need the healing.
Yeah. And it just makes me think about some of the earlier podcasts we did when we first started podcasting. We talked about how, like, when a child first comes out the womb, and we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, right? And that child comes into this world, it's given a name, but it's really just an identifier. That child's really this living, breathing soul that has a spark of the divine in him, but it's given a name. It's for the most part, if the parents are tied to a religious affiliation, the child is put in this religion, and they may be given a name based upon that religion. So they're given like this set of
Beliefs
ideals
and
and
identities,
beliefs and
yeah.
identity. uh the language and so forth is part of the environment. They're put into a school system that now we're starting to see, because all of us are having to do a lot of unlearning, that is really geared toward that particular society. So without me going further, I'll let you like go over some of the topics there, and we'll probably dive deeper into some of those things as we go.
Yeah. All right. So he kind of touched on it. The things that we associate with and become our identification or our association or our programs. Okay. So Russell touched on just a few. He said a name, then perhaps it's your spiritual or religious beliefs, depending on what your parents, believed in when you were born, right? But emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, that's important, because whatever a child sees in that environment, however those parents are communicating their emotions, acting out their emotions, that is literally downloading in the subconscious mind of that child. And that is how that child is learning how to regulate their own emotions. So emotional intelligence and regulation is a big one. All right. You want to add anything to that one?
No, because I think you just touched on something important there. Because like, for example, a lot of you, if you're having children, there's different books you could read on things to give your child the best start, right? Because I know when my kids were in the womb, I would read to them. I would play like soft jazz music, things of that nature, because music is one of those things that actually allow your brain to hemisync, meaning, it taps into the left and the right hemisphere of the brain, and it helps develop the intelligence of a child. So those are some things that we take for granted, because once again, that child's constantly listening and learning and programming.
Yeah. And so remember, 0 to 7. So depending on the emotional charge in that environment of the house or the home, that child is being programmed or gaining identification. So it's important to understand that, because once emotions are tied with some type of identity, is how we form everything. It's how the programs are formed. So what about lack? Growing up in a home that's lack versus a home that's abundant, right? So perhaps words like "we don't have it," "it's not enough," "I'm broke," "wait till payday." If these are the words you're constantly telling your child, "we can't buy that, we can't get that," though it's lodging in the subconscious mind.
Friday.
Wait till Friday, exactly. All of that is being lodged in that child's subconscious mind. So that child is going to have a programming and identification with lack. All right. So that's big. And these are things, and we just have to be honest about the programming. It doesn't mean that, our parents, our current parents, that they're not doing the best that they can. We're just being honest about the programming, and that the things that we have to unprogram, right?
And they 9 times out of 10, they were doing the best they could with what they had, whether it was finances, knowledge, basic life experiences, etc. So, and as time goes along, they either get better or worse depending upon the situation. But it is what it is. So, like they say, might not be responsible for your traumas or what have you, but you're responsible for fixing it. So
Yeah.
we all have some type of healing to do in one form or another, whether you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth or you grew up in utter poverty. It's all about evolving and becoming a better version of yourself.
Yeah. And what about the controlling parent versus that parent that's actually very observant of the true, authentic skills of their child? So, if you have that parent who decides what they want their child to be, you're going to be, an engineer, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to marry this person, versus the parent that allows that child to figure out what they prefer, what they like, what they want to do in this life. You're going to have two different programmings going on. Okay. And we see a lot of people who become adults who have this need to please, who need the constant validation, because they were never able to maneuver and make decisions for themselves. As a growing child, that parent was always, "This is what you're going to do." So that's very important as well. Anything you want to add to that one?
Just what you just said just now is also, say, that reward system. A child knows what you reward them for versus what you chastise them for.
Yeah.
So, if it's a situation where you're rewarding them for deviant behavior, then they think it's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Everything is literally programming that child. Everything. What about eating habits and health habits?
That's a big one.
Yeah, these are things that we really have to unlearn. Just the food that we deem as what we feed our kids, in the morning, or even the health habits of, maybe not even having a specific dinner time with kids, or all of that. All of that is programming. And I'm not saying one way is correct. I'm saying that these are the things we have to look at, that you perhaps as an adult have to look at. And do I have unhealthy habits with food? Perhaps, my parent told me that I was fat, and I developed a eating disorder. I developed anorexia or bulimia because my mother was critical. As a young girl, we see that all the time. We see that a lot. So unlearning and relearning.
Yeah, so let's dig a little deeper into this one, because this is something that's important to both of us, being that you're a weight loss doctor and I'm like a pseudo chef. So, but we see a situation a lot of times where people talk about certain diseases within their family being hereditary. And in actuality, if you really dig deeper, it's not so much the disease, it's the diet and the behaviors. It's like if those things are the same, you're gonna be subject to the same diseases. So if you eat a lot of cancerous type foods and your body's super acidic as a result, then 9 times out of 10, that's gonna perhaps be the way that you leave this earth. Because most of the time it's either heart issues, cancer, and there's certain things that lead to it. So if those things are similar, then you're going to probably end up having similar types of symptoms and diseases down the line.
Right. So it's like unlearning those unhealthy habits, right? Perhaps you didn't come from a family that was health conscious. Like there was nothing, about moving your body or maybe going to the gym or walking 2, 3 times. It was a sedentary lifestyle in your family. It was eat whatever you want, whenever you want,
Not drinking water.
not drinking water. We know people that don't even drink water. It's soda, it's juice, it's energy drinks, it's coffee, so we have to really unlearn habits. We have to be so conscious of this. Again, we said that these things really form, in those formative years, but once you become an adult, you have to take responsibility for the life that you're currently living. You have to.
Like they say, you might come out the womb looking like your parents, but as you get older, you start to look like your decisions.
Okay. So let's talk about, even us learning what racism and colorism is. That's learned.
Sexism, all the isms.
It's learned. No matter how we want to dice it, it's all learned. Remember, a child is born with 2 fears only: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noise. Every other fear is learned. So we have to really look at what we teach our children regarding colorism and racism. We do. That stuff is learned.
Sexism.
And sexism, definitely.
And there's a whole bunch of
gender roles, masculine and feminine, gender roles, that stuff is all learned. It really is. Okay. So let's talk about, how do you know when you have things to unlearn? How do you know when there is something that you need to start putting in the work and unlearning?
I think a lot of times people know, right? Because, everybody has friends and family members that come and say, hey, I want to talk about something. 9 times out of 10, they already know the answer. They're either trying to get you to validate what it is that they're thinking, or, they just want to hear something different. But 9 times out of 10, people know that something's wrong. And they see this repetitive thing just keeps popping back up. And they're like, okay, I keep doing this and I keep getting that. So it's like, it's time to change, right? Like they say, one of the definitions for insanity is doing the same thing, expecting to get a different result.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times people know when it's time to change.
I definitely agree with repetitive patterns. And you will only know this if you are paying attention to the things that's occurring in your life. And we can't go on a spiritual journey without unlearning and relearning. It's a part of the journey. You will have to unlearn some things and relearn some things. Some things you learn, you're going to keep because those were great things, great habits, right? But some things you will unlearn and relearn. And I always say, the earlier you can do it, the sooner you can start doing it, the better life gets. And the younger you could get it done, the better your life will be for the long haul. But repetitive patterns, I want to add to that, you start to have a lot of pain and suffering. Pain and suffering. When life is not flowing, you're stuck. You're stuck. Whether you're emotionally stuck, financially stuck, stuck because of your health, you're in a health battle. When you come to a stuck situation and there's some pain, there's some suffering, you are at a point where you have to do some unlearning and relearning. So pain and suffering. I also want to add to that emotional instability. Like if your emotions are like all over the place, you're anxious, you're depressed, you're angry, you're happy, there's not a steady, smooth state. There's something happening, and it's time for you to stop, assess the situation, and see what possibly is running in your subconscious mind and unlearn it and relearn something more healthy with it.
And it just goes back to what you started off saying before. Most of this starts off in childhood, right? So when people become emotionally unstable, things of that nature, and say you do decide to go seek therapy, you go to a counselor, first thing they always want to do is find out what was your childhood like. They're going to go all the way back to the beginning, and they're going to come forward, because a lot of times they're unhealed wounds, or it's that programming that needs to be changed. If you grew up in a chaotic household where it was a lot of arguing, there was a lot of lack, there was a lot of competition, even amongst siblings, you see sibling rivalries and things of that nature. So a lot of these things will play a part in how you actually like interact with other people outside of the home. So a lot of that plays a major role.
Yeah. And I want to add even your past lives. Sometimes you incarnate in a new life so that you can clear those wounds, ancestral wounds, ancestral things. You come into this life to clear that. So when things are like, when you're at a real stop, you're at a real fork in your life, and you realize that, man, I gotta make some changes. Stop and assess. Look at the lineage. Look at, your maternal line, your paternal line. Look at what the women are doing in your life and in your family. Look at what the men are doing. You might be the person that is here to literally change the generational stronghold that's in your family. So unlearning and relearning, because things are literally passed down that's not healthy. It's just not healthy. And we talked about epigenetics, right? That's all about your environment. Sometimes we do have things in our genes, right, that could turn off and turn on depending on the environment. So, some people get cancer because their environment is stressful. So it turns it on. But if you're in an environment that's peace, love, and light, that never gets turned on. That's dormant in your genes. So it's so many layers to it. That's why it's so important to be conscious of the patterns in your life and take it seriously when this keeps coming up, because it is really time for you to start doing the work.
Just to add on to that, your body's a chemical factory. So it is constantly secreting different hormones based upon how it's interacting with the environment. So if you're in a loving environment, you're going to get was it oxy? I don't want to mix it up with the other drug. Oxytocin. I was about to say the other
That's
one.
the bonding hormone.
But yeah, so that, and then like when you get that fight or flight type rage, then all of a sudden now it's cortisol, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
and one stresses the body and one heals the body.
Right. So even if you're not saying anything, what's going on in the environment can dictate it. So that's why it's so important to watch what you put in your ears as far as music, what you listen to on the radio, what you're watching on television, what you're putting in like food wise into your body. Your body's constantly secreting chemicals based upon these different types of interactions. So not only is your food diet important, what you put into your mind, your heart, all of that plays a major role.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of balance it all out.
And another thing before we move on, how do you know when there's some unlearning that has to happen? If you are in an environment and you're observant and you know things are not right. There, you may be young, but you know this is not normal. This cannot be normal. There's probably some things in your environment that as you get older, you're going to be able to change that. You don't have to adapt those habits, right? You could change that. I was always a very observant child. I was always observant. I observed everything and everybody. So if somebody did something and that works for them and I liked it, then I would maybe try that too. But if somebody did something and I saw that the results were not favorable for that person, I'm not going to go down that path. I learned from you. So sometimes we don't always have to touch the stove to know that it's hot. We saw the other person touch the stove and it was hot. So learn from your environment and do it early. Do it early as you can. That way you don't have to be an older adult trying to fix things that was in your subconscious programming as a child.
You just said a mouthful, because a lot of times, so going back to what we were saying before, so the environment plays a major role. So sometimes, even if you're in a negative environment, but if you're, like she said, an observant type person, but you're reading, you're seeking like new knowledge, you're trying to evolve and you're trying to get better, you can learn from other people's mistakes, right? So, just because you grew up, say, without your father or your mother in the house or whatever, doesn't mean that you get a free ticket just to use it as an excuse.
No.
It's like, if you feel that they wrong you in some kind of way or whatever, be better.
Yeah.
Like, take the opposite route.
And you might have an aunt or uncle or, a godmother and a godfather that was a great influence in your life. And you was like, wow, I like that relationship and that worked for them. How can I learn from them? So you have to be observant and you have to learn from the mistakes and the victories of other people. But that's being very observant and being very conscious of your environment. So, and we got to teach our kids to be observant, because now they're all like this, their heads are down, they're not paying attention to their environment, but we have to pay attention to the environment.
That's a good one.
All right. So if you are relearning and you have to relearn, okay? So, because you figuring out there's repetitive patterns in your life. And if we know that everything that we've learned was based on the programming of the people and the environment around us, then what should we relearn based upon?
So that's a good question. So I think it's like one of those things, like when they say success is relative, right? So first of all, it's like, if a person knows what they want to become, then you seek out the people that have already done it, right? You seek out mentors, whether they're somebody you could actually touch, or like I have 100 mentors out there. They don't even know me. So I see people that are doing different things that I'm like, hey, I want to figure out how to incorporate that in my life. But I look at the people who had succeeded in that, not just talk about it, right? Like, for example, when it comes to like living a long, healthy life, I go out and I look at the centenarians, or these people who live in these blue zones, who live to 110, 120 years old. I want to know, like, what was their daily routines? What did they eat? Like, and you'll find out there's commonalities in there. Like, they didn't eat meals alone. They, may have drank a glass of wine every day or every other day. They had a strong belief system. So these are things that are important to me. If I'm looking for somebody, say, to deal with finances, I want to find the person that's successful. I don't want to hear somebody who just talks about it. If, like, when I wanted to learn how to play basketball, I hung around people who were good hoopers. So, I could learn from them, because even if you don't become as good as them, you're going to become pretty good, right?
Okay. So you're saying that if we have to relearn, it should be based on, if we know some of the things we want to achieve in life, we should kind of seek out the people that have already done it. And I agree with that. I also think that when you're relearning, you have to base what you need to unlearn on right knowledge. So you have to seek knowledge. That's so important, because if you only go based on what you were taught, okay, so the programming your parents gave you, the racism they gave you, the religion they gave you, the financial habits they gave you, the eating habits they gave you, you're going to end up looking just like that. So you have to seek right knowledge. Like Russell just said, is like, go out and seek right knowledge. And sometimes the programming we received, because we believed it our whole life, when you hear something that's different, it could shake you to your core. It could shake you to your core. But if you allow it to sit and to resonate, your soul will reveal if that's truth. Your soul will reveal that to you. So align with the fact that we're spiritual beings. And I think if you understand that, everything you need and what you have to relearn will come to you. It'll come to you.
And that's like you just said, we're eternal spiritual beings having a temporary physical experience that we call life. So, in that spirit is one with nature. So, a lot of times just getting out in nature and studying nature, and getting quiet and getting still, a lot of times things will come to you because it's like what we don't do is we don't give ourselves enough credit for being intelligent or being in tune or having that connection to what most of us refer to as God. And I just say, be quiet, be still,
You gotta be into
because
it too.
the answers are there. And a lot of times it'll come to you, and just try to do things that are more aligned with nature. And I'm trying to say it without stepping on anybody's beliefs out there, because I think you could have different beliefs and kind of live a good, wholesome, healthy life, right? But there's like laws and then there's the law. And I'll give you an example. Like in this country, you have like a legal system and then there's a law. Like a legal system, you could buy your way in and out of it, right? Like, say, for example, there was a point in time where slavery was legal. There was a point in time when it was legal that you could prohibit people from eating in certain businesses, and women weren't allowed to vote, and this group was, that's legal. But
And it
that's
changes.
right. But that's man's law. That's not the law of God. You know what I mean? So the law of God is natural law, which is tied with nature. That's why I say get out in nature, because you have thousands of religions out there. And really 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, man's hand is all tied into it. And it's going to be skewed to whatever their agenda is. You know what I mean? So it's like a lot of times studying history, you'll see it was used for conquest. So it's like, okay, we need to change this. We need to omit that. We need to do this and go in and say, hey, being that you guys don't believe this way, our God say we have free reign to enslave you, steal your land, do all these things. And then to this day, you have people, including those people who were victimized by these beliefs, believing that this was all orchestrated by God and that this is God's law, and they don't question it. And that's the scary part. And that is one of the major things that we have to unlearn. And I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater 100%, but if most people are honest, they'll have that come to Jesus meeting with themselves and see that there are things that change. We could all learn and grow and do better and continue to evolve. Because right now, you can see the world we live in is going to hell. It is going to hell in a handbasket, right? And like they say, the road to hell was paved with good intentions. So something that people think is good doesn't always mean that it's true.
Yeah. So when you're on the journey of relearning, seek right knowledge, and that right knowledge, your soul will let you know. Your soul will let you know. But you have to be intuitive, you have to be in tuned, you have to be listening, to what your soul is telling you. So but most important, that we're spiritual beings. And I think if you align everything with the fact that we're spiritual beings, what you have to unlearn will come to you. It'll come to you in a very organic way. All right, so now here's the hard part. How do we unlearn? How do we unlearn and reprogram? How do we unlearn and relearn? This is where the work comes in. This is where the rubber meets the road, as they say.
There you go.
You have to put in the action steps. You have to actually do it. So you have to form new habits. All right. So let's say you grew up in your household, y'all ate sugary food and anytime, all the time. And now you find yourself, you're, 50 pounds overweight and you have bad, health habits, bad eating habits. You have to put in the good habits. You have to go to the gym. You have to change how you eat and you have to do it consistently. And it is the truth. It takes about 30 days to change the subconscious programming. And then the subconscious mind accepts it. Remember, I said as a child, there's no filter. Whatever we teach that child between 0 and 7, it just downloads. There's no filter. About 8, there's the critical mind starts to form. So it's the filter starts to form. Like, oh, well, I don't, because you might have a child that's they're like, no, I'm not doing that because their critical mind is now on board. But between 0 and 7, there's no critical mind. The subconscious just accepts it. So now you have to go in and reprogram all of that stuff that's in your subconscious mind. So it takes work, consistent work, day in, day out, at least 30 days. It really does take at least 30 days to change the subconscious programming. Okay, so that's across the board. Whatever you got to change, you got to do it consistently for 30 days. So changing habits, that's one thing.
So, and that's why we always push, mind, body, soul. So you balance all three, right? So mind, I mentioned this on a podcast the other day that most people after graduating high school, I think there's something like 60-70% of them never pick up another book to read again. So it's like you have to develop the mind. So you're gonna have to read, you're gonna have to go out there. And today is even easier. You can get audio books. You could actually find like different podcasts out there. You could find a lot of inspirational, motivational things out there that are giving a lot of self-help material that help you build your mental. And then physically, like she said, you got to get into the gym. You got to change your diet. You do these things. It's like I've been either on somebody's field, court, or whatever since the time I was a little kid, and I never stopped. I still go to the gym several times a week to this day. And it's like, it's a way of life. It's not anything that I do begrudgingly or anything of that nature. It's like, it's a way of life, and you see these people who are 70, 80, and they're in great health. They get up every morning and go walk. It's just like ritualistic almost. It becomes a way of life. And it's easy now. If you haven't been doing it, it's going to be tough when you first get back out there and start to do it again. But like she said, after 21 to 30 days, now you're creating new habits and it becomes second nature and it becomes easy.
And your body, because you've also created chemicals to go along with these habits. So for example, if you're a cigarette smoker, your body is connected to that nicotine, and whether you feel a dopamine, or whether you feel relaxed when you have that first puff in the morning, or right after you eat your breakfast or whatever, your body has developed chemicals. That's why it's is so hard when we say to change a habit, but you have to work at it every day and you have to be consistent. One of the things I want to say about that is that we have something called neural pathways in our brain. And a neural pathway is like a groove. If I could explain, it's like if you have a walkway between two houses and it was a grass path, but you kept walking that from one house to the next, one house to the next, eventually that pathway is going to become a clear walkway because you've done it so much, it becomes a deep groove in the ground, right? That's what's happening in your brain. When you create a habit, it's that neural pathway goes back and forth, and you develop a deep groove in your brain. And so that pathway is firing one way. That's it. And what you want those neural pathways to be going everywhere, because that's when your brain light up. That's when you got ideas, creativity. You're like this, you're pumping. But when you do the same thing over and over, and it's that same habit, other parts of the brain don't get,
They don't develop.
it doesn't develop. And we actually, our brain cells die. That's what happens with a stroke. That's literally what happens with a stroke. The brain cells die. So that's why it's so good to take a different route to work. It's so good to change your habits. Like don't do the same thing over and over and over again, because this is all your brain is doing. And the deeper that grooves get into your brain, the harder that habit the harder it's gonna be to break it. So that's on a real brain neural pathway tip. This is real. Like the things we do every day, day in, day out, is creating so much of who we are. So
and just the example you're talking about, like taking a different route to work, is like you'll see, like, okay, you happen to turn down this road versus this one, and you're like, wow, I never knew that restaurant was there. And then you go try out and it becomes your favorite restaurant, or you'll see a little jazz club or what have you. It's like learn like the little different streets in your neighborhood and things of that nature, because it expands your consciousness. And now you have a better vision of what's around you. And it's the same thing, it's like with children, you could become anything that you want to become. The information and knowledge and everything's out there. You have the capacity, but it's like most people just don't want to go through the learning period, right? You got to crawl before you walk. You may stumble in the beginning or whatever, but the more that you do it, the better you get. Now you create different pathways and new grooves.
Yeah.
You want it to look like, say, that ski slope where you just see skis, grooves all over the place.
Yeah.
And those are the people who are more well-rounded, and they're not one-dimensional.
They're not stuck in their ways. They're open to things. Those are people, and it's real, because they don't just keep this one path, this one belief, this one way of doing things, this one everything. You have to really expand. And it's true, your brain will light up. You will become so creative with the things and the thoughts and all of that. Experience new things, like travel, experience different food, different cultures, talk to people that's different from you. This is how you literally reprogram. This is how you unlearn and relearn. And experience is the greatest teacher, okay? Because what it does, we could talk about doing this, but if I never experience a different culture, a different food that's different from my own, if I never go outside the country, if I never visit another city, then this is all theory. It's all theory. And we learn best by experience, because it becomes real to us. It becomes real. Otherwise, it's just theory. Otherwise, we're just learning and reading about the experiences of other people.
Exactly.
So experience new things. That's how you unlearn and relearn. Put in the work. Do something different. Experience a different emotion. If all you ever do is complain all day, I don't know, go jump out of an airplane and experience, adrenaline rush, just to change it, because this is all you're on that same groove in your brain, and you got to change it up. You have to change it up.
Good stuff.
Yeah. I want to talk about auto suggestion because, you know, we've both had to unlearn and relearn. I've definitely had to do it. And I want to talk about auto suggestion. And what this is you're repeating to yourself, you know, what it is that you want to adapt, right? Whether I am peace, I am joy, I'm abundant. You could write it down, you could speak it, you could record yourself saying it and play it at night while you're sleeping. But the more your subconscious mind hears it, it will accept it. Okay, because remember, you're overriding old programs. And if you had a parent that said certain things to you, I had a patient that it was very emotional because she had lost her mother, but her and her mother had a very difficult relationship because her mother called her so many names. And although her mother was gone, these names kept ringing in her mind, you know? So if you've had a parent that somehow told you derogatory things from 0 to 7, you got some unlearning and relearning to do. It don't even have to be your parent. It could be an abusive partner. It could have been, you know, anybody in your life that have told you things and it penetrated. And you have to unlearn that, okay? Because otherwise you're going to be walking around subconsciously telling yourself, you know, having this program running. You're going to wonder why your life is the way it is. So auto suggestion is very, very important.
And I could give you guys all a great example, especially most people that participate in sports, or if you're a sports fan, you know, it's the weekend, right? So there's a lot of football going on. And, you know, I knew like playing basketball, it's like, say, for example, if the game's close or we're down by a couple points and we need a defensive stop and the crowd starts to chant, right? They're like, defense, defense. They're saying defense, and that energy and that chant or that suggestion, actually it helps the players dig deeper and start playing defense, right? Because they're working off of that suggestion. So that's why a lot of times they call the crowd, like in basketball, they call it the sixth man, right? Because the crowd, their chants or their suggestion actually influences the players.
And what do you think marketing is? What do you think commercial is? What do you think TV is? It's all suggestion. It's all suggestion. It's suggesting, oh, buy this. Oh, do this. Oh, take this. That's all suggestion. The power is that you program your own mind.
Exactly.
You don't just allow everything outside of you to program you. You program your own mind. And then you walking around with the things that you want in your mind. And that's where the power is. And that's how you take your power and you create the life you want. You don't allow all these outside influences to program you, because that's all it is suggestion.
And that number one program is a television program that has channels.
Yes.
Think about it.
Yes.
It's called television programming, and it has channels. That's why it's so important to shut that thing off. Read a book, meditate, pray, like dig into things that are going to help you reach your goals. So if you're sitting around and you're one of those persons that watches 72 hours of television per week, they got you.
Yeah. So you got to detox. You know, before you could add something good, you have to detox, right? So you got to detox off the, you know, reality shows, the TV shows, the this, the that. And then you have to fill your mind with the things that you want in there, you know, and I recommend good things. I recommend everything that's of good, you know, because that is our birthright. Everything that's good is our birthright. So
yeah, it's no different than you spring clean your house, you do all these other things. Sometimes we have to spring clean.
Gotta declutter that mind.
Yeah.
And then you make room for new things. You make room for new things. So anything else?
I can talk about that forever. But that's
so I think we'll cut it down here. Unlearning and relearning, guys. You know, it's so important to do this. It's so important to be conscious of what's already running in your program, okay? Already running in your mind. You know, it could be, you know, a trauma when you were 15, 16 years old that is running your life right now. And you can't understand why you can't get it together. Go back. It's something that's running. And all you have to do is know it, you know, recognize it, accept that does not have to be the case. Whether somebody told you that you were not going to amount to anything, or somebody told you this or that, that's not the case. You know, accept the love, accept the good, accept who you are, accept your God-given, you know, authority over yourself, and reprogram that into your mind. And again, put in that work. You have to put in the action steps every day, all day. Got to do it.
Yeah, and allow those negatives, turn them into a positive. Like allow that to be fuel
Exactly.
or a log in your fire.
Be observant. Be
Yeah,
observant.
it's like I love for people to tell me I can't do things. That's the biggest motivation for me.
That's always been mine too.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's it, guys. We appreciate you so much. This has been another episode of Matters of the Heart and Soul podcast. I'm Janie, and this is Russ.
Peace.
And we'll catch you guys at the next episode. Until then, lots of love, lots of light, and take care.